Often when I hear that second reading from Corinthians today, I think of a delightful person I met in my first parish who, every time she came to confession, took a bit more time than most, not because she was a great sinner, but actually because she was likely a living saint, who in the course of her confession not only related her little sins, but also her deeply authentic understanding of who she was being called to be and what she was meant to do as a follower of Jesus Christ. She would often say, "I apologize if I took too much of your time, Father. But as St. Paul says, we're all part of the body of Christ, and for better or worse, I must be part of the mouth." Indeed, we are all part of the body of Christ. That is the great privilege we share beginning at our baptism. And as St. Paul's familiar passage would make clear, it matters not which part we are asked to play, but to have certainty that whatever part is ours is absolutely essential for the optimal functioning of that body. Of course, St. Paul is talking about the mystical body of Christ, not the physical. And the mystical is the church that Christ founded to exist in time, to be his continual presence in the world until the end of time, revealing and reflecting that kingdom that he came to preach and to inaugurate. So this passage from the 4th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel is actually critical to our understanding of who we are and what we are supposed to do, as it reveals who Jesus understood himself to be and what his mission in the world was supposed to be. There in that synagogue in his hometown of Nazareth on a Sabbath, Jesus has been invited to read, and he intentionally selects a passage from the 61st chapter of the book of the prophet Isaiah, which if we would go and visit that ourselves, we would see describes how to observe the 50th year of each century as a Jubilee year. Indeed, a year of favor from the Lord. It was to be a time when business as usual was suspended in so many ways, so that every aspect of life, personal, social, religious, and economic, could experience a sort of reset in order that people would get back in right relationship with one another again, and thereby restore themselves to be in right relationship with God. That is why the poor, rather broadly defined, are of special concern to Isaiah, including those whose lands had somehow been confiscated, or those unjustly held captive or imprisoned, people diminished by physical or other disabilities, or anyone oppressed by the more powerful are mentioned. These are those who are largely excluded from life. And so it's to be a jubilee above all for them. Good news, because by the charity and mercy that God commands be shown them by those who are able-bodied and well-off, any who have been pushed aside and confined to the margins are then invited back to the mainstream. That Jesus sits down after reading that passage doesn't indicate that he was finished, but rather that he intended now to teach, as that was the customary posture of a teacher in his day, to be seated. And that's why we're told that all eyes on the synagogue are on him, and everyone was all ears as well. But what does Jesus teach that day at Nazareth at the beginning of his Galilean ministry? That he is divinely anointed to be the embodiment of that whole prophetic word from Isaiah that he has just read. Let us remember that anointed in Hebrew is the root word of Messiah. So Jesus has disclosed his true identity, and it is one that comes with an important mission. And the special focus of that mission is to reveal God's favor to all, yes, but especially toward those whom the world often rejects and oppresses. We know the rest of the story, that this self-revelation wasn't very well received by the neighbors among whom Jesus grew up in the first 3 decades of his life. First and foremost, his hearers became outraged that this ordinary appearing hometown boy was calling himself the Messiah. And secondly, that he claimed that the poor and oppressed, who were usually blamed for their miserable state in life, are somehow actually those especially favored by God. That is, even more favored than the rich and the prosperous, who in the prevailing thought of Jesus' day were understood to be those who were blessed. Yet having revealed his identity and stated his mission, Jesus would, in spite of opposition and rejection, proceed to fulfill it as he preached and healed throughout that land that we now call holy because of his ministry there. Our understanding of the relevance of this particular passage from Luke to us who are baptized members of Christ's body is undeniably crucial. Clearly, as those anointed with the very same Spirit that Jesus was anointed through our baptism and our confirmation, our mission is without any doubt quite the same as that of Jesus himself. This basic understanding comes into focus in our day in the face of the terrible misinterpretation of Jesus and his mission that sadly is coming to prevail in our present day in what is being dubbed the prosperity gospel and being preached by televangelists in goodly number. Their basic and sadly badly mistaken message is that faith is the source and guarantee of enjoying great blessings in this world and even more of them in the next. We don't need a concordance or any other tool of biblical study to see that the prosperity gospel is completely contrary to what Jesus himself revealed of his own identity and purpose at the beginning of his ministry, as recorded in St. Luke's Gospel. Indeed, let us appreciate the truth that while what Jesus said and did in the last 3 years of his life certainly gained him great notoriety, but it got him absolutely nothing in terms of worldly prosperity. Rather, his upsetting the religious and social status quo of his day actually led to his death on a cross. As members of his body present in this world, Jesus is asking us to do what he did and to accept whatever sacrifices and endure whatever sufferings may come as a result. So let this become the litmus test of the authenticity of our own discipleship. Indeed, if the poor by any definition are not being blessed by us, then we have no leg to stand on if we want to claim ourselves to be a follower of Jesus Christ. And if it is, as likely it will be, the poor, the excluded, the marginalized, upon whom we will one day have to rely as witnesses to the validity of our own discipleship, let us not ignore, or worse, as some who call themselves Christians do, despise and blame the poor, because to do so may very well have better than long-standing consequences. Today, we can say with confidence that the poor of the greater Mashpee area are indeed being blessed through the efforts of our extensive weekly food pantry, our monthly meal ministry for the homeless, our financial and resource assistance ministry. This is to the credit not only of the actual volunteers who carry out that work each week, but of all who in charity generously support it through our Matthew 25 fund. This is as it must be for any community of faith that would want to call itself Christian. Realistically, we know we cannot save the whole world or solve all its problems, but those who suffer unjustly within it would certainly be more greatly blessed if every Christian community in every place would have similar priorities and undertake similar efforts to care for the poor and marginalized at their gate as we do. Yet none of us should yield to the temptation that we can somehow rest on the laurels of a parish's good works merely because our names are on the roster of its registered members. Rather, we must all ask ourselves over and over again, honestly, are we truly active and living members of the body of Christ here and now, in this time and place, as by our baptism we are called to be? The authenticity of our claim to be can only be validated, first, by the witness of our worship, lovingly rendered to God as is his due each week, and then by the compassion we harbor in our hearts that leads us to express in solidarity with, advocacy for, or alms given to benefit those among us whom Jesus broadly defined as being poor. Indeed, it is not by faith alone, as some Christians may try to claim, that we are saved, but by faith proved real in attitudes and actions that imitate rather than contradict those of Jesus himself. On that, our enjoyment of ultimate blessings will finally depend.